should already have.
Greece, Turkey, I have that one.
Yeah, I hope.
Italy.
Well, maybe after I could take it to the office and get
Yeah,
it run off.
yeah, that'll be fine.
And then the week before that,
Okay.
and the other person who's online, because she was calling me whenever.
There actually were
pickups
4 people online
last week,
Yeah.
but even before, she doesn't show up. But, it's Cherna. Cherna is there all the time.
Yeah, I know her, but she gets it from me. She doesn't need it. I've been in touch with her the whole time. Okay. I don't see anybody yet, but I guess they'll. Okay, hi.
Hi.
Rena, you got everything? Okay, hopefully she sees me. All right. Very good. So listen, I want to, guys, if I can have your attention. So what we're finishing today was that one sheet, that one that's set on the top. 16th century early Achronim, Turkey, Greece, Egypt, and Israel. And we're up to page 6, and we're going to talk about Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was a very close associate of the Arizal. And he's very important, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. We will then do the one that says the Jews and the Renaissance. And after that, we will do the Jews of 16th century Italy. So who needs, does anybody here need the Jews of 16th century Italy? Okay. Do you have the one from the Jews and the Renaissance? I gave that out the previous week. You were not here last week. Okay, so we're going to use these 2 today, but first we're going to finish up behind Vital. No, you're allowed to keep them. So who needs this handout? Yeah. You don't have the Renaissance one either? I gave that out already. Well, I'm running out of copies, so.
I need just the Renaissance.
And well, you're going to then need this one.
You gave me that one already.
Could you have gotten this? Oh, that one I just did. Oh, because I just did this one. Okay. That's it. Last copy. Sorry. If she, but I'm going to start talking. Wait, all right. You know what it is?
Are you talking about that?
Yes, turn to page 6 in that one.
That's the last page, right?
This one I have. This one
Because
I
there's
have.
no number.
The one before that, the 16th century, you said.
I just gave that one out today.
All right, I'll have her make from this one.
Let me see. I'll
With
give
the
that
Jews
to
and
you.
the Renaissance, you have that one?
But I'm gonna have her make some more.
Yeah, because that's the last copy I have. Okay, thank you so
And what
much.
else did you? what else
Well,
did
this one, this I still have 1 copy left.
All right, do you want her to make more of these?
Well,
one
that's the
before
only
that,
one
I
that's
have- I'm
left.
sorry, I'm bothering you.
Okay.
I have that, but anyway, I'm giving it to him, so it's not bad.
Excellent,
But
excellent.
there's one more, you just said the 16th century of what?
Yeah, the Jews, I have here extras of the Jews of 16th century Italy. This is the one we hope to get to. The Renaissance, he's running out more copies. I don't have any more right now.
The Renaissance I don't have.
I'm sorry, he's running out more. I know I gave it out last week, but sorry. Okay.
The Great Smicha debate, the Loriani.
Okay.
Should have
Hi.
been bothering you. I have
This
one
is-
before that I don't have.
This is what you're
All right,
talking
this
about,
is,
right?
all right, this is,
Let me see.
This is what you're talking about.
yes, that's what
And
we're
we are
going
on
to do.
this
Let me see it.
page.
Let me see it.
We are here, Chaim Vital.
Exactly, that's what I'm going to talk
You
about.
see here, I make myself a sign. that I
Excellent,
have
yeah,
to
so
do it.
you know where exactly where I stopped. Okay, if I could have your attention. So what we had been doing, we were talking about primarily 16th century, well, I would call it Israel's, was called, even then, it's Palestine. But of course, Eretz Yisrael. And we're talking about the great Rabbanim from there in the 16th century. And the 2 key people from that time period are Rabbi Yosef Karo, who of course that wrote first called Bet Yosef, which is a commentary on the Torah. So he divides the law into 4 main streams, and then he wrote a smaller version called the Shulchan Aruch, so it would be easier to study. You know, going through obviously what the tour had already done, who had gone through the entire Gemara and extrapolating just the halachic points, the main points. All right. And then I had mentioned, much closer to our times, I forget the name of the Rav who did it, but there's a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, like a 1-volume thing. But the real Shulchan Aruch is a much larger, work and much more detailed than that Kitzur one that probably most of us have studied from. All right. We were learning basic halacha. Then I handed out to you the sheet that starts with 16th century early Achronim, because I wanted to show you there were so many other great Rabbanim who lived in that same time period, in that 16th century. Almost all of them were either Jews who had come originally from Spain. Either some of them were already a bit mature, some came as just children, like Rabbi Yosef Karo. And some of them became the second generation. In other words, their parents were the ones who left Spain, going to the Ottoman Empire. And then these are their children who became great Rabbanim in their own right. And each of them influences one upon the other. And all the Rabbanim that I discussed in this 16th century, early Achronim, they are from Israel itself. And I told you Tzfat was the main center. There were some Rabbanim, of course, in Yerushalayim, but the main center in Israel at this time period is the city of Tzfat. And then Constantinople was a major center, also Adrianople, which I told you is today Izmir. Some went directly to Salonika. Salonika will eventually become a very, very large and substantial Jewish community. And some went to Egypt. And each one impacts upon the other. So I found it quite fascinating to do that. So going back to when we're talking about the Arizal, who's famous, right, for the Kabbalah that he wrote, and everybody says this Kabbalah now is based on what's called the Lurianic Kabbalah, but he never wrote any of his works down. He died, unfortunately, at the age of 38. I don't know why, ill. I don't know what happened to him. But he had a pupil, like he got a message, that was his job, that he should go, to Eretz Yisrael, impart all his knowledge to this one student, who is this Rabbi Chaim Vital. And Chaim, let's see how does it come to be that eventually it was written down. So that's where we are. So I'm on page 6 of the thing that's headed 16th century early Achronim. And we're going to do Rabbi Chaim Vital. I have his years there for you, 1543 to 1620. All right, now let's find out a little bit about his history and background and his then very close relationship with the Arizal. Okay. Okay, great. We have a few more extra copies here. Perfect. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. No, it's not something I gave you today. I don't have extra copies. Just listen. I'm only talking about Rabbi Chaim Vital, and then we'll go on to the new sheets. So it won't be a problem. Okay. Again, Rabbi Chaim Vital is famous and known for writing down, right, the words of that he had learned from the Ari. But we're going to see how it came to be that he actually wrote these things down. Okay. And how they then proliferated, throughout the Jewish world. So first, just a little his background. Rabbi Chaim's father, whose name was Rabbi Yosef Vital, was an expert scribe whose meticulousness and saintliness caused his tefillin and mezuzot to be greatly sought after. Now notice, he comes from Italy. Remember, a lot of those Sephardic Jews, right, on their way of leaving Spain, they stopped in Italy, or perhaps he's a native Italian Jew, which definitely there was a Jewish community in Italy, fairly thriving community. He left his native Calabria, that's a neighbor section in Italy, in southern Italy, and he settled in Tzfat. Soon after, his son Rav Chaim was born. So Rav Chaim, as you can see, is a native Israeli. All right. From his earliest youth, A glorious future was predicted for Rabbi Chaim by numerous sages, including Rabbi Yosef Karo. All right, so I just want to show you full circle. Each one learns under another, and each one impacts upon the other. You know, you're right. A lot of if you want to change it you, with your own pen or pencil, you're right. I don't know, for some reason in my own mind it was a C, but you're right. Most sources I looked, it is with a K. Okay. He there. This is an additional thing. A known Kabbalist, Shabsai Lapidos, told Rabbi Chaim that if he would occupy himself with the study of Kabbalah and would neglect worldly pursuits, he would rise to unheard of degree in this field. So obviously he was a very precocious child and student. And there's one, Rav noticed this about him, and he told him he should just devote his life to the studying of Kabbalah. Rav Chaim also became a disciple of Moshe Alshich. We learned about the Alshich last time. And he studied Talmud and Halacha under him. I always emphasize this because I found this quite interesting. Even though their main field of study, right, and expertise might be Kabbalah, they all start off learning the Gemara and Halacha, and then they delve more into Kabbalah. Because even Rabbi Yosef Karo, who we always think of as his preeminent halachicist, he also studied Kabbalah, but the main emphasis was always on the studying of the Gemara and Halacha, and then they would study Kabbalah. Okay. So again, he studied first under the Alshich, and obviously the Alshich was very impressed again with his brilliance, and it says so he ordained him, right, with smicha ordination, which he had received from Rabbi Yosef Karo. So remember, there was this Rav Beirav in Tzfat who started off, his goal was that there should be a Sanhedrin that could deal with many of the main issues of the Jewish world in that day. So based on something written by the Rambam, he, if a group of Rabbanim, well, it said in all Eretz Yisrael, but it was really only the Rabbanim in the city of Tzfat, if they would agree that to assign one particular Rav, who was this Rav Beirav, he in turn could give this smicha to others. In other words, it was a very special smicha that somehow would then become in the direct chain of the granting of smicha from Moshe Rabbeinu. And then he in turn could ordain other Rabbanim. The idea was to have 70 of these Rabbanim who would then serve on a Sanhedrin. As you know, there was a lot of controversy, and it never came to be. All right. But again, so this Rabbi Rav had given the smicha to Rabbi Yosef Karo, and Rabbi Yosef Karo, right, he was granted the smicha, then he in turn grants the smicha. All right. And then, so it said Rabbi Chaim was ordained in the year 1590, and he was one of the last to receive that smicha, starting with that, Rabbi Rav in the city of Tzfat. He began his study of Kabbalah under the tutelage of Rabbi Yosef Kardaver. Rabbi Yosef Moshe Kardaver was preeminent Kabbalist prior to the Ari, right? He obtained a thorough knowledge in this field in the year 1569, the young age of 26. He began composing commentary on the Zohar. In the year 1570, the Ari established his home in Tzfat with the primary purpose of transmitting his extensive and sacred Kabbalistic secrets to Rav Chaim. Remember, I told you he felt like he got this message, that from Eliyahu, that he was in Egypt, to go to Eretz Yisrael, find this one man, who would be his student, and that he would impart all his Kabbalistic theory to this one individual, and that should be his goal. As a result, Rav Chaim became the Ari's foremost disciple and expounder of his school of thought. At first, Rav Chaim had difficulty comprehending the intricate secrets which the Ari revealed to him. As remember, I tried explaining to the best of my ability, which is very poor, about what the Ari wrote, with the thing with the nitzotzot, the sparks, and collecting them, and that this would repair the world. I really don't understand it, can't follow it myself. So if he had difficulty, I surely don't have the ability to do so. Once apparently when he was in Tveria, the Ari, so in other words, so he's a student of the Ari, but he really can't understand, what the Ari is telling him about Kabbalah. So I thought this was an interesting story. So it says, once while he was in Tveria, the Ari gave him a drink from the Kinneret. And he told him that the water was from the biblical well of Miriam. And that from then on, he would be able to absorb the sublime wisdom of Kabbalah. And in fact, after drinking this water, right, he began to finally understand the intricacies of the Ari's discourses. Again, is this in fact? Is this just, a story that has come down? Whatever, I'm repeating it to you. Okay. The Ari, now remember, I told you, and I wrote it here, he never, ever wrote anything down. He would just sit and devote himself to trying to understand Kabbalah, as he interpreted it. And then he did have a small group of disciples around, and one of whom was this Chaim Vital, but he never wrote anything down. And he relied on Rav Chaim because he's busy scribbling here, taking notes, as the Ari is expounding, his thoughts on Kabbalah. And when the Ari died then in the year of 1572, so Rav Chaim was recognized as his successor. I guess he was like the preeminent student, right? So he was given this task that he should somehow collate everything. However, listen to this. Only Rabbi Chaim Vital was trusted by the Ari to accurately transmit all his thoughts, interpretations, and that he would then supposedly write it down. Remember, he's the one who'd been taking the notes. He's the only student that he feels of high enough caliber to do so. Yes, and what was your question?
So that was 2 years that he studied with them, or am I losing?
No, I think he started earlier. But or could be wasn't as long a time. I don't know myself. I'd have to look back. Probably was just several years, but he's the one who the Ari relied upon to take accurate notes, right, of his thoughts. Okay. Says Rav Chaim only remained in Tzfat for a few years after the Ari passed away. And then the year 1578, he actually moved to Yerushalayim. And again, he's obviously well-versed also in halacha, right? So there in 1584, he was appointed Dayan through the recommendation of his teacher, the Al-Sheikh. Okay. Rav Chaim later settled in Damascus. So he's traveled around. He's going to different cities. So he's in Syria now in the year 1593. And there he resided until he actually passed away. Now, this is interesting. How did it come to be, right, that everything was collated and was ultimately printed? So Rav Chaim devoted his energies to arranging the many Kabbalistic dissertations he had heard from the Ari, and he put them in their proper sequence in order to present a complete doctrine and school of thought. So this work, which is called Eitz Chaim, is divided into 8 parts. For years, Rav Chaim kept his manuscripts locked tightly away, not allowing anyone to see them. So in that regard, he's sort of following the example set by the Ari. Ari never wanted to even write anything down, all right? So now, even though he has written everything down and has organized the material, he locks it away. It's like a big sode, big secret. This is what he thought. I guess he felt it was a such a great level, secretive level, that it could not be disseminated, whatever. This is how he handled it. Once, no, absolutely not. Nothing to do with that. He does not want to. Yes.
The suggestion might be that, first of all, it was mystical.
Right.
As a result, it was not to be disseminated among the masses, but kept to a small group who could only study it after age 40.
That becomes later. That reminds me more of that studying more in the Nevuchim of the Rambam, the business with being age 40. Possibly, I don't know. I did not read anything about that, and I always look in several sources. But he obviously felt right that the time was not yet ripe or proper to disseminate this. And right, then maybe it should be meant ultimately to be just an exclusive small group should be studying this, and not the hoi polloi That's us. Okay.
Where did he lock it? He went from Israel to Damascus?
Yeah, he lived in many different places.
So where did he lock it up?
No. It's where is he living at this time period? I think he's still in Israel. He's still in Israel when this happens. I just went ahead to tell you all the various places he lived, but it's in. I don't know if that was the case. Any case, or maybe opportunity knocks. Maybe another community. Will welcome him more. Who knows? I don't know. Remember, life in Israel was. I had started off before I even began talking about the Rabbanim, the Zacharonim from Israel. Life was very, very difficult in Israel. These were very poor. Really, they suffered from great poverty. There were disease was rampant. Sometimes there were actually plagues that sort of went through the city. So that could be a reason why somebody would have left and gone elsewhere. Okay, I guess so. So how did it finally come to be printed and disseminated? Okay, so once when he was seriously ill, his brother, very bad. I'm in the middle of that main paragraph, the first paragraph. Okay, his brother accepted a hefty bribe and turned over the key to Rav Chaim's locked closet to a group of scribes. And 100 of them laboriously copied most of the manuscripts by hand, returning the originals to the closet when they were finished. Thus, the Kabbalistic doctrine of the Ari began to circulate among the Kabbalists of Eretz Yisrael. And of course, from Israel, it's going to go elsewhere, right? It would go into Europe then. Rav Chaim still devoted considerable time and energy to elucidating, means explaining, his master's teachings. He wrote explanations of difficult points and clarified concepts and contradictions in the Ari's writings. I've never read this or studied this. I really don't have any interest in it. But just for those who do study Kabbalah, this would be one of the key main sources. And many of Rav Chaim's writings were also hidden away and later buried in the cemetery. It's like each one's trying to hide the original work. So first, the Ari himself doesn't write anything down. Okay, but his main student is Rabbi Chaim Vital. So, and he sort of entrusts Rabbi Chaim Vital that he should ultimately write everything down and organize it, which he does, but he puts it in this locked closet. All right, then we heard how the brother, receives a bribe so that he opens up, unlocks the closets so that they must have written very fast. So like I said, 100 scribes, copied down all the material. Meanwhile, Rab Chaim Vital is writing some of his own original works and interpretations based on the Ari's writings, all right? And his various lectures. And so eventually he must have instructed that this would happen, that his writings should be buried in a cemetery. I presume they're in some sort of a locked box to preserve them. Otherwise they would disintegrate. A generation later, so a generation, I don't know, it means 100 years. Generation, sometimes people say it's only 25 years, but whatever. Many years after, the manuscripts were exhumed. That means they were dug up, right? Box opened up. And today they form the nucleus of the many books on the Ari's Kabbalah. So a lot of the interpretation is based really on what Chaim Vital wrote about the Ari's, thoughts, his interpretations, his views on what Kabbalah is. But what's come down through the generations is really how Rabbi Chaim Vital interpreted it, okay? Because he's the only one who really learned it directly from the Ari. The Rav Chaim also, Vital, right? Also composed sermons on the Torah and on Navi Kesuvim, which are almost devoid of Kabbalistic overtones. In other words, he also wrote things that had nothing to do with Kabbalah, resembling more the style of his other mentor, the Alshich, because the Alshich was not a Kabbalist, all right, but he was a halachicist. He also wrote books on Musar, instructing readers how to live a life of utmost holiness. Some of his responses were later incorporated in the response of his son, Rav Shemuel. All right, so we have now concluded this section, and we're now going to study more about the Jews in general during the Renaissance. Yes. You want to make more copies of this? Yes. Okay. All right. 3. Let me just make sure I have all the pages. So I'm giving them to you in proper order. Hold on. Yeah. I don't know. I never know how many copies to give her. So it's hard to say because some people come, some people go. So I never know.
I'll tell her.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. No. That's right. Right. Okay. Now, we're now going to start the one that's headed the Jews and the Renaissance. You don't have that? I thought I gave that out to you. If you don't have it here, he doesn't. Yeah, this is what it looks like.
Did you give us a date?
Yeah, I gave it to you, but, and I gave it out last time also. So do you need a copy? Okay. Because, okay. So everybody who was present, those of you on computer. So we're going to do the one, right, that says the Jews and the Renaissance. Okay, now when we think about the Renaissance, wait, let me just get myself some notes I have here. Okay. We are thinking primarily of the end of 15th, 16th century. That's the time period of the Renaissance. But, some scholars feel it already started even in the year 1300. In other words, it's not like there's an abrupt change, from medieval times, going into the Renaissance era, this time period. You could say it is the bridge between the medieval era and the more modern era. Okay. It's going to be this change within the thought processes of people, their attitudes. They're going to get away from the very restricted lifestyle that existed during time period under feudalism, and they're going to gradually expand their minds and want more freedom. All right, freedom of thought. This has nothing to do with this. I'm talking about the Renaissance in general. This has nothing to do yet with Jews. I mean, I will discuss, the Jews and where do they fit into this change, this gradual change, that's going to go. And it's primarily in Italy. All right. But what happened is, even though it's the great flowering of culture and art is going to be in Italy, which is mine. These were the extras. Okay, thank you so much. It will gradually impact, I would say, mostly the people of Europe. All right, obviously some of these ideas will eventually go throughout the world, but it's primarily in Europe that these changes are going to be taking place. All right. So let's begin. So obviously the whole course here is about the Jews and Jewish history and how does that fit in, but you have to see the total picture of what's going on at this time period. Okay, so you're with me, the Jews and the Renaissance. A new spirit gradually began to spread over Western and Central Europe. No, not Eastern Europe yet. That will come at a later point. They're like a little behind the times, it's going to start more. And then you'll see it's mostly Italy, okay? In the late 15th and 16th centuries, although just keep in mind, obviously, there's going to be this gradual transition, maybe already into late 14th, into 15th century, okay? But the flowering, right? The manifestations will be late 15th and 16th century. This spirit was called the Renaissance or rebirth, culture, the desire for freedom and the love for beauty, which was the backbone of the ancient world. So they're like going, it sort of reminds me, you're like in Muslim Spain in the early days. Remember, they were very interested in what the culture of the Greek and Roman world, right? That it's going to go more into decline. But now in Christian Europe, there's going to be this desire to go back and learn and study the classics. All right. Again, they consider studying anything that came out of Greece and Rome. This would be art and architecture, even systems of government, right? That's what they're going back to. This all came to the fore at this time. Intellectuals now began to study the classic languages, would be Greek, right, and Latin, right? Greek being obviously the language of the Greek Empire, and then obviously Latin, the language of the Roman Empire, and even Hebrew, right? That's a very interesting. The wisdom and poetry inherent in these languages became all the rage. Okay, so it's essentially how are the Jews going to be? In other words, they're very keen to learn the Hebrew language. All right, again, they figure this is like the basic language of the classical era, and that's why they want to study. It's not that they're interested in Judaism. It's nothing to do with that. They're just interested in the language. Okay. And in addition, the upper classes began to imagine the cruelties and crudities of I got this from someplace. All right. And a new critical spirit was awakened that tested new ideas, values, and institutions. So it was an age of great intellectual and cultural achievement. So they're not just accepting things, as the church had interpreted, which was what occurred throughout that medieval period. And now they're going to start thinking more independently, but they're going to hark back to the ancient times of the glory days of Greece and Rome. And again, and this will also include an interest, in the Hebrew language, just the language. Okay. The Renaissance was limited to the upper classes, those poor people, right? General population, they're too busy just trying to survive. They're not the ones who have the leisure, or the education, right, to engage in all these intellectual pursuits. And while they tried to gain some freedom and beauty for themselves, they were basically suppressed. I mean, they had very difficult, hard lives. We're going to gradually we're growing out of that feudal system of the peasants relying on the Lord. That's going to gradually change during this time period as well. But it's as I say, it's not as if they could devote themselves then to culture. They're still trying to just survive day to day. To them, the Renaissance only represented a growing looseness in morals and ethics. So they actually were critical of the lifestyle, right, that's coming to these upper classes at this time period. And before long, the Renaissance gave way to reaction and bloodshed. Now, I'm going to devote a lot of time just to that because our emphasis is on what's happening to the Jews during this time period, but there were a lot of, I will touch upon them, but there were a lot of battles back and forth. And I'll do a separate unit on the Reformation because that's sort of when you study the Renaissance, there's always the Renaissance and the Reformation. So I'm not talking about the Reformation per se yet, but you'll see from some of the comments that is what it's indicating. Western Europe was soon plunged into wars where religion and politics were commingled and confused. Okay, so just know the Renaissance itself, I would say that is an emphasis on art and culture and beauty. Eventually will be literature, of course. But it's really what's going to cause so much friction. Okay. The fate of the Jews was inevitably bound up with the history of the Renaissance. Of course, whatever happens in the general world affects us as well. But when the Renaissance gave way to reaction, what happened was the Reformation begins the year 1517. Martin Luther, but remember learning that? But the 95 Theses on the door of the church in Wittenberg. So it initially, well, I'm going to do a separate unit on this. Martin Luther first, was very welcoming to the Jews because obviously they're rejecting the Catholic Church. But he thought that they would then join his Protestant church. He was very upset when they didn't, so he turned virulently against them. Okay, whatever the Jewish hopes for a better world were quickly extinguished. Okay. As I mentioned prior to this, Italy was the center of the Renaissance revival, and Italian high society soon became more polite and learned. Okay. Discussions on philosophy and broader cultural strains became the norm. Jews themselves, right, also contributed to this revival in learning through their translations, right? Obviously, because we were very well versed, obviously, in Hebrew, but many Jewish scholars also would have known bits and pieces of Greek. You know, those who were the better educated also would have known Latin. All right. And they also wrote original works during this time period. Some of the most important men of the Renaissance movement had Jewish teachers and encouraged Jewish scholars. So I have their names here. Just, it's hard to retain, all these names, but just wanted to show you how the Renaissance did impact Jewish society as well. And Jews also contributed to this change at this time period. Here's one individual's name is Elijah del Medigo from 1458 to 1493. So still 15th century. He became a familiar figure in the court of Lorenzo the Magnificent de Medici. So when you studied world history, you learned about, right, Lorenzo, all right? And the Medicis in general, how they were such great patrons. They were obviously very wealthy and patrons of the arts, okay? I mean, they're the ones who helped, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, they would have been supporters of those artists. They were from Florence. Florence is northern part of Italy. It's a court that formed the very heart of the Renaissance. There, Elijah spread the knowledge and interpretation of the philosophy of Aristotle. All right. So like these are not the most, obviously for sure, prominent individuals during the time period of the Renaissance, but you see how Jews are involved and are influencing, right, what's going on at that time. The age of the Renaissance soon led to the age of exploration, which was remarkable for its discovery of new lands and new routes to old lands. The great voyages of the Portuguese and Spanish navigators, and later also then the Dutch, French, and English, just think of America, right? All these explorers came, but also they went to Asia, Africa, right? Laid the foundations for the modern world. Jews had long been interested in astronomy, right? That goes back centuries and centuries. And again, I think the reason for the great interest in astronomy, because this is how they would figure out the calendar, right? So that's why they study that. But because of their great interest in astronomy, they now aided the science of navigation. And there are several Jews who, invented, I think it's the astrolabe, they aided Columbus in his explorations, and for later periods, the sextant. I know many things come from this time, and it was the Jews who invented. Also, the preparation of maps became the specialty of a family of Jews in Mallorca. Mallorca is an island off of Spain. Okay. Jews were also interested in other fields of science and mathematics, but they loved to study medicine. And this goes back, right? We know this also for centuries. And the combination of knowledge and humanity particularly appealed to them. Obviously, we're always concerned, for our fellow man. I mean, I think that's part and parcel of the morals and ethics of Judaism. So again, there's the beginning of some of this movement, change in thought processes during the Renaissance. And we can see how the Jews and our way of looking at life in the world is contributing and affecting also these, Christian scholars. The most profound Jewish influence on European civilization was the study of the Bible. They were all interested in that. That's also this ancient work. They also grew up, right, going to the church, hearing sermons. The clergy studied it, and through them, its ideas penetrated into the minds of the people. You need to turn off your phone. Thank you. Commentaries were regularly written on it, both by Jews. Well, of course, we know, we've been studying that, all the various commentaries of Jews, but Christians also wrote commentaries on the Bible. European law and morals, theological beliefs, and hopes for the future were derived largely from what the Christians called the Old Testament. So obviously, it has nothing to do with Jews, the New Testament, but that's our Torah, the Old Testament. it's referring to the Torah. Many Christian reformers based their views on interpretations of the Bible text, and some even based these interpretations on actual Jewish writing. So they were so curious to learn, they would actually read, works that Jews themselves had written, and like what other Meforshim, the Jewish commentaries would have written, and they studied that too, because they wanted to broaden their way of looking at things. Again, they're gradual stopping of reliance on the church's interpretation. Okay, so that's why they are looking to see, well, also what have the Jews written about and what have they interpreted. Yes.
If I may add something, I'm passing this out to everybody. I happen to be a rabbi, and I often used to speak before Christian groups. I never wanted to call it the Old Testament.
Well, it's not to us. It is the only testament.
But when I speak to them, you know what I do? I call it the original testament.
Right. Okay. You know what?
I need to say the Bible.
Right. Exactly. They call it the Bible too.
New Testament.
No. Again, we're not having a discussion on this. I thank you, but let me go on because I want to talk about the Renas. No, you'll tell me. You'll tell me later. Okay. Thank you. All right. So again, they're studying the Bible, but they also want to know it in its original language. So that's why the study of Hebrew became, again, we're talking about a minority of people, but these are the great intellectuals from this time period. So the study of Hebrew was now made part of the curriculum at a number of European universities. And, for example, I believe it's Yale University, it might be Harvard. Also, the original early scholars there did study Hebrew. And I think it's on, I can't remember which of those colleges, or maybe both. They actually, yes, it also has Hebrew in it. Unfortunately, the stated object was to use this knowledge of Hebrew as an aid in converting the Jews to Christianity. I mean, obviously they obviously had a secondary reason why they're studying Hebrew, right? Because they want to convert us. But as the Renaissance progressed, this study resulted in an increasing more sympathetic attitude on the part of cultured Europeans toward the literary treasures of the Jews. It's not like they love us as Jews, but they like, what the output, the intellectual output that has come out of Judaism. It's not, you'll see as we delve more into what happens to the Jews, we almost become these pawns there. You'll see. Okay, here's another individual from this time period. This man is a German Jew, actually. His name was Elias Levitas. He lived from 1468 into 1549. He wrote a Hebrew grammar and also went through, made sure it was a correct reading of the biblical text based, I guess, on how he interpreted Hebrew. His works originally appealed to his fellow Jews, but over time, his works became known to Christian scholars. At the beginning of the 16th century, Cardinal Egidio of Viterbo, whatever had his years there, invited Levitas to become his teacher of Hebrew. So now they're hiring Jews to teach them, right, this original language of the Bible. And soon other noted Christian scholars became his pupils or studied his grammatical works. This is interesting. The study of Kabbalah also left its mark on Christian scholars. Do you remember this person's name? I remember studying him in world history. Pico della Mirandello, right, who lived from 1463 to 1494, again, 15th century, a philosopher and apologist for traditional Christianity, used Kabbalah thought, right, Kabbalistic thought, and text to defend his exposition of the Christian faith. This to me is warped, but he saw something in Kabbalah and he felt that this added to his knowledge and appreciation of Christianity. During the same time, look how many of those people out there who go to these Kabbalah courses, they're not even Jewish. I don't know what appeal it has to them, but whatever. During this time period, numerous Jews of Spanish Portuguese extraction found their way to, just turn it off. Don't try to turn your phone off. Found their way to Italy. Numerous individuals in the nobility and upper circles of Christianity welcomed in these exiles, because again, they're going to learn from that. Remember, those Spanish Portuguese Jews were a highly educated, very uh, they were steeped in culture. They had a very rich knowledge of whatever ideas were circulating in the world of that day. So when they then obviously they're expelled, and many of them will come to settle in Italy. So they're going to have an impact then also on the Christians living in that country. And we're talking about higher level, intellectuals. And many of them settled in Rome. A lot of these Spanish Portuguese, they settled in many, many cities, but there was a sizable Jewish community then in Rome. The Jews residing there, this I found upsetting to learn, said the Jews residing there felt that by adding so many of their brethren into their community, it might result in further anti-Jewish outbreaks. If we're very small in number, we're not so noticeable, but when we become a larger community, okay, now people will start attacking us. But get a load of this. This is always unfortunate to bring in the non-Jewish world into our disputes. The Pope, whose name was Alexander VI, was outraged by this attitude. What these local Jews, they don't want to accept it, these highly cultured Spanish Portuguese Jews. He permitted the exiles to enter, and he then punished the Roman Jews by imposing a fine on them. Very lovely. So every whole thing kind of backfired on them. Now I want to talk about two very well-known people, and when you study even world history, you will learn about these individuals, okay? And they are Johannes Pfefferkorn and Johann von Reuchlin. Okay, this sounds a little familiar you might have learned this in world history. Okay. In the year 1509, a controversy over Jewish literature arose, which while it initially affected Jews, it had a greater effect upon the Christians. A Jew by the name of, his name obviously was Yosef, but it becomes Johannes, all right? Pfefferkorn, years 1469 to 1523, ran into difficulties with both Jewish and non-Jewish authorities. I think it was of a financial nature, all right? He must have had debts that he owed, and now he's going to be ostracized, especially by the Jewish community, because he's not being honorable. So what does he do? He eventually converted in 1505. Okay, totally obliterating whatever debts he might have owned. Together, his entire family. It's not just he himself. This is his family as well to convert, and he sought the protection of the church, so nobody could go after him to collect the debts. Eager to avenge himself upon the Jews. How nice. These apostates are the worst people. I mean, throughout, we've been studying this when we did the medieval period, now going to the modern period. It is those people who opt out of Judaism and convert, become Christians, and they become virulently, opposed to their former brethren, and they just wreak havoc upon our lives. Okay, so the protection of the church. Eager to avenge himself, he revived the old accusation that the Talmud was full of blasphemies against the Christian faith. Lovely. And this goes back to medieval times, so it's like it keeps on cropping up, century after century. The Dominicans are always awful as far as when it comes to Jews. Of Cologne, we're talking about Germany, right? So we're talking about German scholars and aided him in writing his book, slandering the Talmud and its commentaries. They included in these writings all the stories and false charges which have been prevalent ever since the days of Nicholas Donin in 1239. Pfefferkorn and his colleagues then received the emperor's permission to confiscate all copies of the Talmud. It's just a repeat. Remember how they were all burned in the square in Paris? All those cartloads of, it wasn't just Gemara, but all sorts of, Jewish writings, including prayer books, and to burn them. The Jews did. It's, I have it later on, but it's in the 1500s. Okay. The Jews did all they could to rescind this order, and 1 year later, the emperor himself, let me just go back to it, restored the confiscated books. All right. This only occurred after a number of Frankfurt Jews, again, we're talking about Germany, extended the time limit on a debt which one of the king's favorites owed them. It all boils down to money, right? And the influence, right? And payments or non-payments in this case. And so that brought that to an end. But you see, there are going to be other times. So, when you start learning about the Holocaust, you can see everything I've been teaching you. You see, they just repeating, they're taking things from the past and, consolidating all these ugly accusations against the Jews and implementing them. This was still not the end of the matter. Pfefferkorn and other opponents of the Jews continued their hostile propaganda. The emperor established a commission to investigate the Jewish books. And one of its members was a man, his name was Johann von Reuchlin, 1455 to 1522, a foremost Christian scholar of Hebrew and a proponent of Kabbalistic thought in Germany. He used the Kabbalah to explain the concepts of messianism in Christian thought. So now you understand why they studied Kabbalah, because they turned it to their Messiah. Reuchlin opposed the destruction of the books, arguing that through the study of their mystical literature, the Jews could be brought closer to Christianity. There's always an underlying reason why they become apologists for the Jews. He appealed to the emperor the emperor at this point, I think it's Charles V, not to allow the burning of the Sfarim to take place. We'll talk a little bit more about it, and I have more specific dates. Yes, yeah, right. Jewish literature now became the center of a controversy which raged for a number of years. There was not a single critic of the forces of bigotry who failed to range himself on the side of Reuchlin in defense of the Jewish book. So there were many people, look, the thought processes of these Christians who were, opposed to attacks upon the Jews, and our great literature, but they had in mind that they obviously wanted ultimately to convert us. But thank goodness there were many other people though who also backed, Reuchlin's, when he spoke out against the burning of all these books. Upper churchmen, especially in Italy, and the Pope himself sympathized with Reuchlin. I mean, the popes go back and forth. You'll see it. We'll learn about that. The only people who were forced to stand aside during this controversy were the Jews themselves. It's like, we had no voice, and this didn't matter what we said. It was whatever these different Christian scholars and their arguments with one another. And they were, of course, we were the ones who were most directly concerned. After a few years, the quarrel died down. Other discussions began to shake the foundations of the church. I told you I will discuss this later in more depth. At that very time, Martin Luther came forward with a series of devastating criticisms of the Catholic Church. The Reuchlin-Pfefferkorn controversy had helped to bring to public notice some of the weaknesses of the religious society of that day. So, all along throughout the Renaissance, there is just going to be gradual, up until then, the church was inviolate, whatever they said, had to go, and you had to follow their interpretations. But now people are going to be more critical of the church's sayings, and are going to gradually move them. So you can see, as I say, how during this Renaissance era, how it will lead us more into the modern world, less reliance on the church as the guiding force, and that man himself, and also during this time period, I didn't mention it, but is also what becomes known as humanism. What does man think about things? How does man interpret everything? The emphasis on man, not on the church. Okay. So this whole controversy helped to bring to public notice some of the weaknesses, right, of the religious society. Luther took full advantage of this situation, and he was very much influenced by some of these individuals. And don't forget, because we're talking about Germany, right? And Martin Luther is from Germany. But the era of liberalism, which had brought more toleration to the Jews of Western Europe, soon came to an end, because there's going to be another movement called the Counter-Reformation, all right, which is the Catholic Church pushing back. And that's going to lead to many, many wars and battles, through Europe. And we always managed to suffer as a result. It had nothing to do with us. You know, this is a Christian controversy, but it will affect the Jewish people. Okay, so we have finished this, and next time we will then emphasize more, talk about the Jews of Italy itself. If you still have your maps of Italy, which I had given out on prior occasions, if you could bring them, you know, because as I discuss the different cities, you'll see exactly where are they located on the map of Italy. Be well, everybody. Take care. Bye, guys who are listening in. Bye-bye.
Bye, Malka. Bye-bye, Malka.
Good to see all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I guess gotta figure this out.